In the 1950s, a scientist named James Olds placed a tiny wire into a rat's brain. When the rat pressed a lever, it received a small electrical pulse to a specific cluster of cells. The rat loved it, so it pressed the lever again, and again, and again. It pressed the lever 7,500 times in 12 hours. It stopped eating, it stopped drinking, it forgot how to sleep. It chose the pulse over survival. He wasn't trying to torture the animal. James Olds and his partner Peter Milner were trying to find pleasure. They had threaded that electrode into a tiny region called the septal area, and they thought they had found the pleasure center, the place in the brain where joy lives. Press the lever, get a hit of joy. It seemed that simple, but the rat's behavior didn't look like joy. It looked like compulsion. The animal wasn't happy, it was frantic. It would crawl across a painful, electrified grid, taking shocks that should have made it turn back, just to press that lever one more time. It would ignore food, it would ignore a mate, it would press the lever until it collapsed. It wasn't chasing pleasure anymore. It was a slave to wanting. For decades, we misunderstood what Olds had actually found. We called it the pleasure chemical, dopamine, the molecule of happiness. Your brain makes it when you eat something good, when you fall in love, when you get a notification. That's the story you were told, and it's almost entirely wrong. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. Dopamine is the drug your brain makes to make you want the pleasure. And that difference is everything. To understand what it really does, you have to look at a monkey. In 1997, a neuroscientist named Wolfram Schultz did a simple experiment. He would ring a bell, wait a few seconds, and then give a monkey a drop of sweet juice. At first, the monkey's dopamine spiked when the juice hit its tongue. Pleasure, reward, that made sense. But after a few dozen repetitions, something strange happened. The dopamine spike moved. It stopped firing when the juice arrived. It started firing when the bell rang. The chemical wasn't responding to the reward. It was responding to the prediction of the reward. Schultz had discovered that dopamine isn't about how good something feels. It's about how much better than expected it feels. It's an error signal. Here's what that means for you. Your brain is constantly making predictions about the next few seconds. If reality is better than your prediction, you get a pulse of dopamine. If reality is worse than your prediction, your dopamine drops. Your brain uses it to say one thing. Pay attention to this. This is important. Do it again. But here's what's fascinating. A second group of scientists proved that wanting and liking are two completely separate systems in your brain. In 1989, Kent Berridge and Terry Robinson took rats and blocked their dopamine entirely. The rats could still like things. If you put sugar water on their tongue, they would still show the little facial expressions of pleasure. Their tongues would still react the way they do when something tastes good. But they would never seek it out. A rat with no dopamine will starve to death even with food right in front of its face. It still likes the food. It just has zero motivation to get up and get it. Dopamine isn't pleasure. Dopamine is the desire to get up and get the pleasure. It's not the high, it's the craving. And that craving is the most powerful force in your nervous system. Which brings us to the feeling you know better than any other. Boredom. You think you know what boredom is. You think it's an emptiness, a lack of stimulation, a flat, neutral state where nothing is happening. Boredom is not neutral. Boredom is a withdrawal. In 2021, psychiatrist Anna Lemke at Stanford published a book after spending years studying patients with severe addiction. And she found a single pattern that connected all of them, whether they were addicted to painkillers, gambling, or video games. When your brain gets hit with a big spike of dopamine, it doesn't just go back to normal afterward. It overcorrects. It slams you down below your baseline, into a state she calls a dopamine deficit state. For hours, you have less motivation, less joy, less energy than you did before you got the hit. You feel flat, anxious, restless, you feel bored. And the only way to make that feeling go away is to get another hit. Now your brain doesn't just want the dopamine, it needs it to feel normal again. And this is what modern life has done to you. For 300,000 years, your ancestors got their dopamine in tiny, earned doses, tracking an animal for hours and finally finding it, finishing a tool, finding water after being thirsty. Each hit was small, unpredictable, and it required effort. Now look at your day. You wake up and your phone is already a lever. You pull down to refresh. A small, unpredictable hit. An email, a like, a headline. You swipe to the next video. Maybe this one will be better than expected. Spike. You swipe again. Spike. You check the news. You check the messages. You check the stocks. Spike, spike, spike. The average person touches their phone 2,617 times a day. You think you're checking your notifications. Your brain is pressing the lever, just like the rat. And the lever has been designed by thousands of engineers to be as unpredictable as possible. Because your brain doesn't fire for the reward anymore. It fires for the prediction. Will the next swipe be funny? Will it be shocking? Will it be better than the last one? That uncertainty is what keeps the dopamine flowing. That's why you can scroll for 3 hours and feel more exhausted than when you started. You aren't being entertained. you are being kept in a state of chronic wanting. And when you finally put the phone down, you crash. You feel that flat, anxious, restless boredom. You feel like you should do something, but nothing feels worth doing. That's not your personality. That's not laziness. That is the dopamine deficit. Your baseline has been dragged down so low that your normal life can no longer reach it. Sitting in silence feels unbearable. Reading a book feels slow. Having a conversation feels like work. Not because those things are boring, but because your brain can only feel them if it isn't busy recovering from a chemical debt. And honestly, what comes next is even stranger. Your brain can reset, but you have to let it go through the discomfort. In experiments where people were forced to do nothing, really do nothing, for just 48 hours with no phone, no books, no stimulation, almost all of them reported the same arc. The first 6 hours were torture. They described it as crawling out of their skin. The next 12 were deep, heavy boredom. And then, something shifted. Around the 24-hour mark, the world started to come back into color. Food tasted better. A walk outside felt interesting. A conversation felt alive again. Without the constant spikes, their baseline slowly rose back up. They didn't need a massive hit to feel okay anymore. Small, real things were enough again. Your brain was never designed to be constantly satisfied. It was designed to be constantly seeking. And that seeking system worked beautifully when rewards were rare and required real effort. But we have built a world where a super stimulus is in your pocket, a lever that never runs out. And we are pressing it 2,617 times a day, training our own brains that nothing in the real world will ever be as immediately rewarding as the little glass rectangle. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not distracted by nature. You are experiencing the exact same compulsion as the rat with the wire in its head. The only difference is you built the lever yourself, and you are the only one who can choose to stop pressing it.